To understand Nigeria, you need to appreciate where it came from.
In 1900, Britain officially assumed responsibility for the administration of the whole of what we now know as Nigeria from the Niger Company. And then, gradually over the years, British protectorates were established throughout the territory. In 1914, the protectorates were amalgamated into one Nigeria.
Actually, there's one additional detail that bears mentioning. In order to take over the territories from the Niger Company, the British government paid £865,000, a huge amount in 1900. So let's establish a simple truth. The British didn't travel halfway across the world just to spread democracy. Nigeria started off as a business deal for them, between a company and a government. Incidentally, the Niger Company is still around today, only it is known by a different name, Unilever. But that's another story.
Throughout these formative years, men of the colonial service were at work, patiently guiding the Nigerians towards eventual independence, introducing the elements of local government in villages, encouraging local industry, developing overseas trade, building a stable administration, preparing the ground for the giant strides to come. Nigeria is part of West Africa. It covers an area of over 339,000 square miles, nearly as big as France and Italy put together. Its population comprised half the people of all the United Kingdom dependencies. It is a land of many tribes and many languages, a land of differing views and differing people. The country ranges from desert on the edge of the Sahara, through the cattle grazing pastures, to the mineral hills of the Central Plateau, down to the coast and the swamps of the river Delta.
Most countries are born out of shared ideals and common identity. Nigeria was simply created to fulfill a business requirement, that of supplying goods and services to Great Britain. With that backdrop, it was no surprise that after 50 years of colonial rule, Nigerians began to fight for their own self-government.
Newest visitors to London are delegates from Nigeria, members of the Legislative Council. They want home rule for Nigeria's 20 million native population. Speaking about his trip, Prince Adedoyin says,
"We have come to the United Kingdom as delegates of the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons, chosen by our people, in order to demand for a more democratic constitution, to modify 4 laws affecting our lands, minerals and chiefs, and to request the British government to grant us more political responsibility to enable us to take an active part in the management of our affairs within the framework of the British Empire."
These were the very distinguished Nigerians that the world was initially exposed to. They were proud, highly intelligent, and on a mission, both for Nigeria and for Africa. They granted interviews and gave speeches in full agbada, and people took them seriously. They wanted self-government, civil rights, and equal rights. They wanted to master their own destiny. Their actions took place a full 16 years before Africans in America, but with far less documentation and rhetoric. But it wasn't only Nigeria struggling for freedom. It was Africans all over Africa. By the 1950s, it was clear to the colonial masters that Africans would no longer tolerate inequality in their own countries. Most of the African elite, as they continue to do today, had sent their children abroad to ensure those children benefited from Western education and exposure. These Africans in the diaspora enjoyed a sense of solidarity which was reinforced by the racist treatment they received. They met up frequently and organized a series of Pan-African meetings. They called it the Pan-African Congress. The 5th Pan-African Congress was held in Manchester, England. That event spawned a large number of men who would go on to become political leaders in their countries. They included Kwame Nkrumah, who went on to lead Ghana, Jomo Kenyatta, who went on to lead Kenya, Hastings Banda, who went on to lead Malawi, Peter Abrahams, who was a South African novelist and went on to become a prominent member of the ANC, George Padmore, one of the most influential Pan-African figures of the 20th century, and 2 important Nigerians, Jaja Wachuku and Obafemi Awolowo. Despite the impressive delegate list, the conference was not meaningfully covered by the British press. It should have been, because it marked a turning point in Pan-Africanism from a passive to an active movement, and its main resolution spawned the decolonization effort across Africa.
Accra, capital of Ghana, went wild with joy when Dr. Nkrumah was released from political imprisonment in 1951. His enthusiastic followers had elected him to power. The independence of the former Gold Coast colony was thereby assured. A born leader, Dr. Nkrumah dreams of a united Africa with himself its chief ruler. In the copper mines of Northern Rhodesia, 3rd largest producer in the world, the rule is white administration, colored labor. The same combination constructed the far-famed Kariba Dam. The Federation Premier, Sir Roy Walensky, is in no hurry to change the existing balance between white and colored races, claiming that in Rhodesia, it is a good, workable arrangement. Johannesburg, with a population of more than 1 million, is a magnificent city. Gold mine workings, visible on the outskirts, remind old-timers that the discovery of the precious metal only 74 years ago was the foundation of Joburg's wealth. Links with the not-distant past, when the colored man owned Africa, are still treasured outside town. And the Union of South Africa never forgets that black men outnumber whites 4 to 1. The fear that the colored men may one day overwhelm the white is at the back of the South African government's segregation policy. But even here, the existence of the Black Sash movement, protesting against government policy, shows that many white South Africans agree with Anglican Father Huddleston in fighting segregation. Huddleston was brought back to England by his order. His work goes marching on.
Members of Nigeria's new parliament assembled outside the House of Representatives in Lagos. They'd come from all over the Federation, and their ceremonial costumes were a clear indication of the importance of this first session. The ceremony was conducted by Sir John Stuart Macpherson, the Governor-General. After inspecting a guard of honour mounted by the Nigeria Regiment, the Governor-General proceeded into the chamber to open the first session of the new House. It will be responsible under the revised constitution for the government and well-being of the Federation of Nigeria.
When you compared the Nigerian situation to those of other African nations, things didn't look so bad. We were not independent like Ghana, but were not in as dire straits as South Africa. Our main exports of cocoa, groundnuts, and palm oil had contributed to a large trading surplus. The British were gradually given over power, and by the time the Queen came to visit in 1956, we had representation in our own House of Reps and were at least on the route to self-government.
Lagos, capital of Nigeria, prepares to give the welcome of its life to Queen Elizabeth II, or in its own language, to Oba Obiarin, the King Lady. 1 million Nigerians are here to greet her, among them the Federal Minister of Labour and Welfare, Chief Festus Okoti Igbo. 17 hours from the mists of London Airport, the Queen's Argonaut comes to rest in the sunshine of Ikeja, the airport of Lagos. The Guard of Honor is mounted by the Nigeria Regiment, many of whom, like the Queen's husband, wear the Burma Star. Governor-General Sir James Robertson and Lady Robertson welcome the royal couple as they leave the Argonaut. In a temperature around the 100 mark, the Queen still looks cool as the royal car makes its 13-mile journey to the capital at a steady 8 miles an hour. Every foot of the way, the road is packed with Nigerians. The welcome is as tremendous as any Her Majesty has ever been given. And it's a proud welcome, for this is no longer a people in colonial subjection, but a free nation with its feet already firmly on the road to self-government. The Queen's car draws up to the city boundary, where the leaders of Lagos are ready to greet her. The Governor-General is there to present them to Her Majesty. Chief Adeniji Adele II, who has 5 wives and 25 children, is the first to welcome the royal guests to the city his ancestors have ruled for 2.5 centuries. Next are legal and other dignitaries. Finally, a welcome from a somewhat younger citizen, 4-year-old Folashade Lawson, daughter of the chairman of Lagos Town Council, a young lady who knows exactly where she's going and means to get there. Well, did I do it right?
When the Queen visits the Nigerian Federal House of Representatives, it is in the full panoply of monarchy, a rich contrast to the simple summer dresses she has worn for the less formal functions. She receives a loyal address and replies. Among her audience is Chief Festus Ebo, Minister of Labour. Great hopes are centered on this new Nigerian leadership. Nigeria, a country as big as Pakistan, is rapidly becoming self-governing. Many expect it to become the foremost Negro state of the continent. In the grounds of Government House, a garden party is given for the royal visitors by the Governor-General Sir James Robertson and Lady Robertson. About half the 1,500 guests are Africans. Oba Adeniji Adele II introduces some of Nigeria's area chiefs to Her Majesty. The Oba's family have ruled Lagos since before the British came. Now he is the president of Lagos Town Council. A typical development in this growing country where tradition and innovation go hand in hand.
Looking at those images of Nigeria, you can understand why the announcer said,
Many expect it to become the foremost Negro state of the continent.
Unfortunately, that's not what happened.
With every development, Nigeria drew nearer to her goal, independence within the Commonwealth of Nations. At the Constitutional Conference of 1957, it was decided that the 3 regions should have internal self-government. At a further meeting the following year, it was agreed that a date in 1960 should be the target for independence. Accordingly, the eastern and western regions became autonomous. The North, exercising the right of self-determination, decided to wait until March 1959 before making the change to regional self-government. In August 1957, Nigeria's first federal prime minister was appointed, Alhaji Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, now Sir Abubakar, a northern statesman of great foresight. In December 1959, members were elected to an enlarged House of Representatives. Sir Abubakar was confirmed in office, and one of the first acts of the new government was formally to petition the United Kingdom for independence in October 1960, in accordance with the promise made in London 2 years earlier. The change from dependent status had been deliberate but orderly. Nigeria was now ready to stand with the other Commonwealth countries and determined to play her full part as a member nation. Now, the last elements of British administration have been withdrawn, and a great new nation emerges. A nation of 35 million people who have put their faith in the democratic life, and whose voice will command respect throughout Africa, the Commonwealth, and the world.
Don't you know, we're talking about a revolution. It sounds like a whisper. Don't you know, we're talking about a revolution. It sounds like a whisper. While they're standing in the welfare lines, crying at the doorsteps of those armies of salvation, wasting time.
Today is Independence Day, the 1st of October 1960, and Nigeria is now indeed an independent, sovereign nation.
By an act of the British Parliament, Nigeria became an independent country on the 1st of October 1960. Tafawa Balewa was elected Prime Minister. Nnamdi Azikiwe formed a coalition government with him and became Governor General, and Obafemi Awolowo became head of the official opposition. At independence, Nigeria had a UK parliamentary-style government. Three main political parties existed: the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroons, the NCNC, which had control of the Eastern region and was led by Nnamdi Azikiwe, the Northern People's Congress, the NPC, which had control of the Northern region and was led by Ahmadu Bello, the Action Group, AG, which had control of the Western region and was led by Obafemi Awolowo. The parties essentially represented the three main tribes, the Hausa, Yoruba and Igbo, a bad situation in a country that was supposed to be united as one. It meant that the ruling party essentially represented only one constituency, in this case, the North. So why was the North so powerful? The answer is simply because the British had designed it to be that way. Firstly, they had created a northern region, which was by far the largest by geography and population, hence giving it the most seats in Parliament. Secondly, the North had always been ruled indirectly, so the local customs and power structures had remained untouched. And thirdly, rumors abound that the North had been helped by the British to enter power by devious methods including vote rigging and compulsory voter registration.
No doubt, we in Nigeria are very anxious of fostering a good relationship with all the countries in Africa, and we hope that after October 1960, we shall go all out in order to make friends of our African neighbors. We are really interested in the other African states, but not in the sense of having a federated African states or a union of African states, because we feel though the thing might come about sometime in the future, it is most important for our countries in Africa, especially those in West Africa, to do their utmost to develop the resources in their individual countries.
Hearing Balewa speak, you are reminded that on the whole, the founders were intelligent people. However, they were also ambitious and had a deep mistrust for each other. Awolowo had always felt that the Yoruba should be the leaders, and was unhappy as leader of opposition. Azikiwe, on the other hand, was in a figurehead role, similar to the Queen's role in England today. In fact, Azikiwe had only joined with the MPC because Festus Okotie-Eboh had forced him to. So who was Festus Okotie-Eboh?
Of Labour and Welfare, Chief Festus Okotie-Eboh.
Among her audience is Chief Festus Eboh, Minister of Labour.
Festus Okotie-Eboh, who once increased the duty on imported shoes to protect his own shoe factory.
You know they touch money, but money go they miss. Your 5 accounts, they don't fool for Swiss. You they chop and you think say they no go notice. Waiting you they do bad and you know this.
Okotie-Eboh was in charge of financing the NCNC party, a role which gave him a lot of power and eventually led to his appointment as the Minister of Finance for Nigeria. No one really understood or questioned how Festus was able to raise money. But according to Harold Smith, this money that he raised came from UK multinationals who were forced by the Foreign Office to make donations to the NCNC party. Given his control of such funds, it is no wonder Okotie-Eboh was powerful and was able to force Zik into a coalition. Zik had always financed the party, but as he was running out of money, Okotievo was fast replacing him as the key person behind the party. Hence, British propaganda, which was evidenced by the fact Okotievo was pointed out in every film about colonial Nigeria, was that one day Okotievo would replace Zik and they would have their man in power, as they've done in many other countries in Africa. But let's not be too negative about the man. He did have some positive achievements. He was responsible for bringing Julius Berger to Nigeria and directly responsible for the Echo Bridge getting constructed. Unfortunately, his wheeling and dealing also represented the beginning of the corrupt practices that have continued to dog Nigeria to date. But let's get back to the main story. Nigeria's politics were clearly divided along ethnic lines, and due to the number of seats held by the North, no major parliamentary decision could be taken if the North opposed it. For the South, it was clear that the only way they could enter power was either through a constitutional amendment, which was highly unlikely, or through violence. The creation of the Midwest state, led by Dennis Osadebe on August 9, 1963, also highlighted another issue, that of the non-homogeneous makeup of the South. The Midwest was home to the Edos, Urobos, Ijos, Isekiris, Isokos, and other tribes. The three-region structure largely ignored these and other minority tribes in Nigeria, so creating this state was positive as it brought a new voice to national politics. However, the negative impact was that it made the North even stronger. Other developments also added to the strength of the North. In 1962, the leadership of the Action Group was split as a result of a rift between Awolowo and Samuel Akintola, the Prime Minister of the Western region. The ensuing fight sparked rioting in the Western region, and the federal government declared a state of emergency. They then appointed Dr. M.A. Majekodun as a temporary administrator for Western Nigeria. Dr. Majekodumi's first act was to place many Action Group leaders under house arrest and then to launch an investigation into Awolowo. A special commission led by Justice G.B. Coker found that Awo had used public money to finance the Action Group and also uncovered evidence linking Awo with a conspiracy to overthrow the government. Awo was immediately charged with treason. Some other prominent Nigerians were also charged, including Anthony Enahoro, Lateef Jakonde, and Josiah Olawoyin. Most were found guilty, and Awo, along with several others, was sentenced to 10 years in prison. With all these dynamic politicians in prison, public confidence in the political and judicial system was seriously weakened. By 1964, when new elections were to be held, the situation was quite bad. Civil abuses were widespread. The flamboyant lives of some of the ministers made it clear that public funds were being diverted for personal use. Most constituents saw little benefit accruing to them, but instead saw a complex patronage system emerging. In Parliament, the AG had more or less disappeared as a result of the Awolowo affair. This meant that there was no formal opposition party. The NCNC, on the other hand, had strengthened its position as it now controlled both the East and the Midwest, the latter which had formerly been controlled by the AG. The MPC was in close cahoots with Samuel Akintola's new NNDP party, which now controlled the Western region. So it meant that the first elections since independence was essentially contested by two large alliances, one led by the MPC and the other led by the NCNC, essentially pitting the North against the South.
Politicians and press are already electioneering hard. Some observers say that the main parties in the three coastal regions will gang up against the North, This could put a big strain on Nigerian unity. Supporters of the Nigerian press say its vitality and vituperation are the great safeguards of democracy. Critics allege that it forgets the cause of building a united Nigeria in its eagerness to slam rival personalities, parties, regions and tribes. The Zik who's so angry, incidentally, is Dr. Ezekwe, who is now, as ceremonial president, supposed to be above party. He's been provoked beyond endurance. Behind this lies ill feeling between northerners and the Igbo tribe of the eastern region. How serious is this press war?
Well, this is not a very serious matter. This is a matter that happens in every country. You get odd controversies taking place here and there. I think all the leaders are at one to see that the unity of the country is maintained. And therefore, naturally, you get the tail of every party trying to drag the party one way or another. But I think once we leaders come together, I'm sure everything will be resolved peacefully.
This was a high-stakes situation. The North wanted to ensure that it remained in power. The South wanted to ensure that it tasted power. On both sides, there was massive vote rigging. It was so bad, the Western region, that there was intimidation and outright ballot box stuffing. In the West, fights erupted, with an estimated 2,000 people dying in the violence. So it's 1965. The army is watching all of this from the sidelines, and is getting increasingly frustrated as they see the elite fight each other for power. Due to the ongoing violence in many parts of the country, they have been deployed to police elections. They watch as people stuff ballot boxes, and common Nigerians ask them to intervene, ask them to stop the chaos and the violence. All this caused the nerve to snap in the minds of the younger officers, and was directly responsible for the first Nigerian coup. At the beginning, I asked what changed. What made Nigeria, the great African hope, become Nigeria, the land of no tomorrow? It was the events of the 15th of January, 1966. Although the coup plotters were not successful in taking power, they were effective in destroying the government. The surviving members of government, led by Nwafo Orizu, handed over power to the military. The reason they gave was the volatile internal security situation. That day, Nigeria became a dictatorship.
The coup now begins to look more and more like a straightforward military revolt against corruption in government, and one that's likely to last. It has popular backing. What's not so clear is who its real backers are. The man at present being put forward is the army commander, General Agui Ironsi, who arrived at the heavily guarded Parliament buildings to hold the new administration's first press conference.
Who was Ironsi? He was a 42-year-old officer, born in Umuahia in East Nigeria. He had joined the Nigerian army in 1942 as a private and worked his way up to Major General by 1964. He was the first Nigerian to ever head the Nigerian army. He was an officer's officer, trained by the British, and a firm believer in the non-political role of the army.
The federal military government in Nigeria has taken over the administration of the country. The functions of the federal military government will be exercised by the Supreme Military Council, and details of which will be announced later. Permanent secretaries in charge of federal ministries will continue in their office, carrying out the normal functions of government, and they shall be directly responsible to the federal military government when constituted.
Will there be press censorship during this regime?
I do not think that I should start off with press censorship. But I may impose censorship if it became necessary.
John Davey of the Daily Mail of London, will there be any change in the external policy of your government?
No.
News of London. May I ask the General whether he regards his administration as a permanent or a caretaker administration?
My main concern is to restore law and order as soon as possible.
As early as Sunday, the day after the coup, people pursued their ordinary diversions as if they still lived under one of the most stable governments in Africa. No one seemed distressed or puzzled. Perhaps they were right not to be. Perhaps it's all very simple. In Lagos, from all one gathers, the coup is cheerfully accepted, and the Sardona and Akintola are unlamented. Even Balewa's departure from office is likely to be more wept in London than in Lagos. Gabriel Fagbore, a Lagos journalist, gave me his view of the takeover's real causes.
From my own point of view, corruption, nepotism on the part of politicians of all parties, and the danger of internal strife in Nigeria swept the army into power. Some of these soldiers, I believe, are much more intelligent and much more patriotic than the politicians, whom we all condemn.
But there has been a wave of this in West Africa in particular, Central African Republic, Dahomey, the Congo, all kinds of places. Why is this?
This is not peculiar to West Africa. You have them in South Africa, too, in South America too. I mean, there had been coup in Asia, in Sudan, and also in Pakistan and Middle East.
No special reason, then, here in Africa?
Well, I can see no special reason, but there is something I say less. Young elements in Africa are in a hurry as much as the continent. most of these African countries are being ruled by men who belong to the old brigade, who are corrupt and who accept nepotism, corruption, injustice, greed, avarice as virtues. And some of us, I'm not a member of the army, mind you, but some progressive elements believe that this is not the age for corruption. People who go into public life must be prepared to serve for the glory of service.
If only Gabriel knew what was in store. Maybe he would not have been so welcoming of the military. Anyway, although Ironsi had taken over power in the south of the country, the north was still controlled by one of the coup plotters, Major Nzeogwu.
Major Nzeogwu, can you please give me an account of the night of the coup in Kaduna?
Well, it's rather something like the longest day. We started this off on the night of the 13th of January when a night exercise was planned by the military college, which I command. We took our troops to the ground and taught them how to do night attacks. We didn't tell them what we were planning for, but at the end of the exercise we took them out and showed them various places where they were to stand and just remain in their vehicle. Next day we went out again for the same type of exercise, and at the end we issued them with ammunition this time, live ammunition, and told them that they were going back to the same place as they went yesterday, but this time they were to get certain people.
And they were with you, were they?
Oh, of course they did. Oh, they all supported us.
Did the Sergeant himself attempt to fight?
Well, no. We didn't see him until the time we actually shot him. He ran away from his house when we fired the first few shots of anti-tank gun into the building. The whole roof was blown up and the place was set alight. Then we went to the rear of the house and started searching from room to room until we found him amongst the women and children, hiding himself. So we sort of took away the women and children and took him.
Now, what are your relations with General Ironsi in Lagos?
Well, very good. He's my boss. I have always been under him, and I still am under him. There isn't really any problem. A few misunderstandings arose, but this was due to the publication in the press and by announcements over the radio. At one time they started calling us in Kaduna rebels, whereas in fact the revolution was all a planned affair all over the country, and many other people were cooperating.
Imagine being a northerner and listening to the flippant way that this Igbo major talks about killing your premier. Add on top of that the North's general hate of the East, and you can start to get the picture of the sort of tribal tension Nigeria was heading towards.
One thing I've noticed, Premier, while I've been here, is that Northerners seem to have, I might almost call it, obsession about the Igbos. Could you perhaps explain that to me?
Well, the Igbos are more or less the type of people whose desire is mainly to dominate everybody. If they go to a village, to a town, they want to monopolize everything in that area. If you put them in a labor camp as a laborer, within a year they will try to emerge as headman of that camp, and so on. Well, in the past, our people were not alive to their responsibilities, because you can see from our northernization policy that in 1952, when I came here, there weren't 10 northerners in our civil service here. Then I tried to have it northernized, and now all important posts are being held by northerners.
Is this policy of filling all key posts in the north solely with northerners and not with other Nigerians a temporary or a permanent one?
In actual fact, what it is a northerner first. If you can't get a northerner, then we take an expatriate like yourself on contract. If we can't, then we can employ another Nigerian, but on contract too. This is going to be permanent, I should say, as far as I can foresee, because it will be rather dangerous to see the number of boys who are now turning from all our learning institutions, coming out with having no work to do. I'm sure whichever government of the day might be, it will feel rather embarrassed, and it might even lead to bloodshed.
Doesn't this damage the idea, sir, of all people in all regions in Nigeria being fellow citizens of one country?
Well, it might, but you are, I mean, new to our region, but how many northerners are employed in the east or in the west? The answer is no. And if there are, there may be 10 laborers employed only in the two regions.
What Bello said was mostly true. The Easterners at that time were the most progressive Nigerians. They were in top positions all across government, and with Ironsi and Easterner in power, the northern fear was that the East would dominate Nigeria forever. Ironsi, in turn, did two things that exacerbated the problem. Firstly, he did not execute the coup plotters, but instead put them in detention. Secondly, he announced a unification decree, which centralized power and reduced the previous autonomy of the regions. These mistakes would lead to Ironsi's eventual overthrow and death. In July 1966, after 7 months in power, Ironsi's government was overthrown in a bloody northern counter-coup. The coup started off as a mutiny in Abeokuta, where northern soldiers began to massacre eastern soldiers. It then spread across Nigeria and became a full-scale insurgency. In hindsight, it is clear that a northern strike was inevitable. Northerners had suffered the most casualties in the January coup, and given that most of the coup planners were Igbo, they were itching to get their own back. Ironsi, who was in Ibadan at the time, was turned on by his own guards, dragged into the bush, heavily beaten, and murdered. Two northern Nigerians played prominent roles in the coup. The first was Murtala Ramat Muhammad, a UK-educated officer who had been the mastermind and whose original plan was to lead the North and take it out of Nigeria to become an independent nation. The second was Theophilus Yakubu Danjuma, an officer who was officially the head of Ironsi's personal security detail and had let the attack on Ironsi in Ibadan happen. With the ongoing massacres, Igbos began to flee back to their homes in the east of Nigeria. They were received by the military governor who Ironsi had appointed, a gentleman called Chukwuemeka Odumegu Ojukwu. Emeka Ojukwu was the son of Sir Louis Ojukwu, who at the time was probably the wealthiest man in Nigeria. Emeka had led a very privileged life, first attending King's College in Lagos, then Epsom College in Surrey, and finishing at Oxford in the UK. Ojukwu was obviously distressed by what was happening to his people and made it clear to Lagos that he was unhappy with the situation. In Lagos in the meantime, the Northerners were having discussions about how to move forward. The British and American ambassadors along with some highly placed civilians, were at Ikeja with the Northerners and were advising them against secession. The Northerners then decided to appoint their highest ranking officer, Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, much to the chagrin of Murtala, who had led the coup. Murtala would never forgive Gowon for this. Ojukwu in the east immediately rejected this, as even though Gowon was the most senior northern officer, he was not the most senior Nigerian officer. Thus began the events that would lead up to the Nigerian Civil War, also known as the Biafran War.
In our case, that thousands have been massacred is not in dispute. One then might be permitted to ask, at what stage does this massacre become genocide?
It was true. Igbos were being mercilessly killed, and the nation was descending into anarchy. A solution needed to be found to prevent the country from imploding. Ojukwu saw a potential way out in Awo, who was still in prison. If Awo was released from prison and decided to take the Yorubas out of Nigeria in protest of northern domination, then Ojukwu could do the same with the Igbos. Awo and the north weren't stupid, however. Oil had been discovered in the east, and it was becoming clear how much wealth could be generated from that oil. So, Awo, on his release, instead of announcing Yoruba secession, accepted a position as the highest-ranking civilian in Gowon's administration, essentially creating a North-South alliance and leaving the East in the cold. It's ironic that Awo, one of the people responsible for bringing democracy to Nigeria, would serve in and support a completely undemocratic government. It probably gives an insight into how much he wanted to be in power. Another interesting question to ask is why Britain, whose shining democratic experiment in Nigeria was being decimated, did not interfere and refused to recognize the Gowon government. The answer, I guess, is fairly obvious. Nothing would really change for Britain. Either way, the implications of what Awo and the British failed to do are clear. They tacitly acknowledged an illegitimate regime and set the stage for coups and illegitimate takeovers to come. With the North and the South in an alliance against Ojukwu, his position was becoming untenable. Igbos, who had all been displaced, were encouraging him to take them out of Nigeria and form an independent nation. Gowon, on the other hand, was making it clear to him that any such action would be viewed as treason and would result in a police action, an euphemism for war. In a bid to prevent hostilities, both sides decided to meet on neutral ground. So they ended up in January 1967 at Aburi in Ghana as guests of General Joseph Ankara for peace talks.
Hey, what's up now? Brother, what's up? This is a groovy party, man. Yeah, I can dig it. Stop it. Right on. Hey, man, what's your name?
Mother, there's too many of you crying. Brother, there's far too many of you dying. You know we've got to find a way to bring some loving here today. Yeah. Father, we don't need to escalate. You see, war is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate. You know we've got to find a way to bring some love in here today. Oh, picket lines and picket signs don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me so you can see. Oh, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Yeah, what's going on? Oh, what's going on? Right now. Hey man, what's your name? Right on. Right on.
Omówiono najważniejsze sprawy związane z dalszym rozwojem województwa i kraju.
We are fighting this war in order to avoid the disintegration of the country into several mini-states, which will become protectorates of foreign powers. Everyone knows what the consequence of such disintegration will be. The tiny states will all recklessly acquire arms from their protectors. There will be continuous war, insecurity of life and property, and much greater sufferings than we have yet experienced.
Trouble among the emerging nations as buses line up to carry civilian volunteers to Nigerian army recruiting centers. Some 10,000 citizens answered their government's call to arms. Nigeria's rebel eastern state, the Republic of Biafra, declared its independence, setting off an unofficial war. Even women leave their homes and jobs to volunteer for military service. Nigeria is attempting to regain the breakaway state and declared that if necessary, Biafra will be crushed by force.
They say evil prevails when good men fail to act. What they ought to say is, evil prevails.
Rwanda, yeah, Rwanda. They said many are called, a few were chosen, but I wish some wasn't chosen for the blood spilling of Rwanda. They said me shocking up, then they go. Thrown in the fire, but you never get burned. But I wish some didn't get burned in Rwanda.
They said the man is judged according to his works. So tell me, Africa, what's your worth? There's no money, no diamonds, no fortunes on this planet that can replace Rwanda, Rwanda, Rwanda. Yeah. These are the cries of the children. Anybody in my ground in America? It's the United States of America. Then why can't Africa be the United States of Africa? Rwanda, Rwanda. And if England is the United Kingdom, then why can't Africa unite all the kingdoms and become the United Kingdom of Africa? Rwanda, 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 Rwanda. Yeah. Yeah. These are the cries of the children. Yeah. Rwanda, Rwanda. Can anybody out there hear our cries? Yeah. Heaven's cry. Jesus Christ. Yeah. Lord, can you hear us calling you? Rwanda, Rwanda. Can you hear us calling you? Rwanda, Rwanda. Can you do something? I'm talking about Rwanda. Yeah, Rwanda, Rwanda. Rwanda. I'm talking about these. I'm talking about Rwanda, Rwanda. I'm talking about. I want to play my guitar for Rwanda.
If civil war comes, and I do think it is imminent, you're quite right, it will for us be the price of freedom. Our people here have for a long time been prepared for this eventuality, and I am confident of their readiness. I think that when it does come, that the people on the other side would be surprised as to what they're going to get. And I'm confident that it will not last long.
2 months ago, it appeared Nigeria was close to winning its war with Biafra, but now the fighting seems to be at a stalemate, apparently because French weapons now are reaching the Biafrans. Half of Biafran's 7 million people are said to be nearing starvation, and only a few food shipments are being flown in. We have obtained some extraordinary film of the war in Biafra made by French cameramen, fought by a group of Biafran commandos and their white mercenary leaders. 7 mercenaries in charge of 4,000 Biafran commandos. One, called Michel X, was going into his first battle. Others, called Big Bill and Marco the Brave, were veterans. A Belgian, Mark Goossens, had fought in the Congo and Yemen. He said the mercenaries were paid regularly, but were critically short of weapons.
Every month we pay here in Biafra, we will be paying.
Have you good soldiers?
Yeah, we have very good soldiers, very brave soldiers. We don't get weapons enough and ammunition enough.
But you have some planes in the night. It's not enough?
It's not enough. It's not enough to fight against Nigerians, because Nigerians have more ammunition and more weapons. We get tanks. We don't get...
have no bazooka?
We have no bazooka. We don't get any anti-tank weapon. Yeah. That's why we...
Are you in the Congo before?
Yes, before I was in
And
the
you
Congo.
too, Bilwa?
Yes, he was.
Bilwa,
We were together, yeah.
And the next time, where I
really don't know.
In command was the oldest of the mercenaries in Biafra, a South African known only as Major Williams.
So make up your minds to start work. Not go around like bloody women, yak, yak, yak. Get them moving. Oh, yeah. Move, move. Where?
Major?
That way.
Oh, please, may I ask you a question? You are a British?
Oh, no, South African.
South African? Why you are on this side and not on the other with the British?
Oh, I'm a South African, not British. Why should we help the British? This is the side I prefer for my conscience. I'd never fight with the communists. I was fought against them, Central Africa. And I just disagree with communism, plus I like these people. They outgun us, outnumber us, but we've got the fighting spirit, as you saw this morning. The blokes are willing to go in, have a go, and without morale, we will beat them.
And you stay in Biafra?
Oh, yes, definitely.
More? Definitely?
Definitely, until the end of the war. Then I go on to the next one.
Thank you.
You got to know when to hold up, know when to fold up, know when to walk away, know when to run. You never count your money when you're sitting at
Major General Ojukwu, the man who led the secession in Biafra, is on his way to seek political asylum in Zambia, in Central Africa. He is said to have with him 3,000 pounds of luggage and his Mercedes-Benz automobile.
At 40 minutes past 4 p.m. today, Nigerian time, Africa's worst war came to an end, that between Nigeria and breakaway Biafra. Major General Philip F. Young, left in charge of Biafra when General Ojukwu fled Sunday, announced the end on Radio Biafra, a mobile radio station. He appealed to the federal Nigerian leader, General Gowan, for a ceasefire to negotiate a settlement within the framework of a united Nigeria. The war has lasted 2.5 years. Around 2 million people have died. The peril that remains now is starvation of 4 million Biafrans or slaughter by federal troops.
We have fought a long, bitter battle, and it has ended in a victory for common sense, a victory for the unity of this country. And we have got cause to thank all the people of this country for what they have done to help to keep this country one. But I think above all, the gallant officers and men who had given their lives that this nation might live. And we have with us today Colonel Obasanjo, and unfortunately the other field commanders are not able to be with us at this moment. But we have Colonel Obasanjo, who is the commander of 3 Marine Commando, who had been able to capture a number of senior secessionist officers, and he had brought them to Lagos to see us in order to let us have their acceptance of the spirit of one Nigeria.
To formally give up secession and report for reappointment and redeployment. Philip Effiong.
Hello.
Your Excellency.
Glad to see you again.
My pleasure.
How are you?
Very well indeed.
Glad to see you again. Thank you.
Patrick Amadi.
How are you?
Excellency.
Glad to see you again.
Thank you very much.
Glad to see you again.
It's an
Welcome
experience.
back. Honestly. Glad to see you again.
And I would like, therefore, to take this opportunity to say that I, Major General Philip Effiong, officer administering the government of the Republic of Biafra, now wish to make the following declaration. That we affirm we are loyal Nigerian citizens and accept the authority of the Federal Military Government of Nigeria. That we accept the existing administrative and political structure of the Federation of Nigeria. That any future constitutional arrangement will be worked out by representatives of the people of Nigeria. That the Republic of Biafra hereby ceases to exist.
I am Emeka Odumegwu Ojukwu. I was sometime General of the People's Army, the leader of Biafra during the Nigerian Civil War in the years 1967 to 1970. You know, of all wars, the most cruel is the Civil War. The Biafrans fought with everything they had. They were outmanned, outgunned, everything. But they stood, head up, shoulders back, chest out, and the stiff upper lip. Classically British. We could not understand that the British government could ever fail to see the justice of our position. We could not understand even that the world, seeing injustice, could just stand by. And when we cried out in pain over the suffering of the children, their distended stomachs, kwashiorkor and all those things, we cried out. We felt actually the world owed us understanding. That was the one thing the world never gave us. Our people suffered greatly. They were deprived. They were bombarded. And they were rendered totally destitute in the period. You might also ask me immediately, then why continue the war? Because we, the Biafrans, saw ourselves throughout the entire period under the threat of genocide. And even when we couldn't fight anymore and moved forward into surrender, we surrendered practically in the belief that this was the end.
With the war over, Nigeria refocused on economic success and achieving its potential as an African nation. National unity was at an unprecedented level, and the mood of the country was strongly positive. Gowon, who had now been in power for 4 years, had become a national hero and enjoyed the unquestioned support of his military. Nigeria genuinely had a chance to reverse the mistakes of its past and pursue a new course. Over the next few years, Gowon made some important moves. First, he ensured no retaliation against the Igbo by making it abundantly clear that the Igbos were not to be persecuted. He provided funds for the rebuilding of the lands once occupied by Biafra and put an Igbo, Ukwabi Asika, as the administrator. Gowon's second action was to announce 1976 as the firm date for a return to civilian rule. His third action was to deal with the youth. He announced the creation of the Nigerian Youth Service Corps, the NYSC. The purpose of the NYSC was to inculcate in Nigerian youth the spirit of service to the country and emphasize oneness and brotherhood of all Nigerians. The program was compulsory for all Nigerian graduates, meaning you could not be employed unless you had served. It was a laudable concept, and the NYSC is an institution that still exists today. Gowon's fourth move was to deal with the economy. Firstly, he created a Nigerian currency, the Naira, to remove the lost links with the colonialists. Secondly, he took measures to address foreign ownership of Nigerian companies. At the time, 65% of Nigeria's economy was foreign owned and controlled. The foreigners consisted of two groups, the European conglomerates and the Lebanese, Syrian and Indian traders. Not surprisingly, there was widespread resentment of this overwhelming presence of foreign capital in Nigeria. Gowon, being sensitive to that, announced the Nigerian Enterprises Decree, which limited foreign equity participation in most sectors to 60% and effectively forced foreigners to sell shares in their businesses to Nigerians. The various steps he had taken were very well received by the population, and the general feeling was that Gowon would steer the economy to a strong position. At the same time as Gowon was making his moves internally, God was blessing Nigeria externally. Nigeria had joined OPEC in 1971. At the time, Bonny Light, Nigeria's oil, was priced at $2.65 a barrel. On October 5, 1973, Syria and Egypt attacked Israel, starting the Yom Kippur War. Western countries publicly supported Israel, prompting the Arab countries to impose an embargo. Overnight, 7% of the world's oil production was turned off. The oil price promptly shot up to $12.60 a barrel. Nigeria pumped up its production and reaped windfall gains. With Nigeria experiencing the perfect storm, the stage was set for resurgence. Unfortunately, the military proved to be just as bad as the politicians had been. The windfall oil revenues were squandered and used to provide luxurious trappings for the elite. The shares of foreign companies that were indigenized found their ways into the hands of the elite and government parastatals rather than the masses. This was because the government, top-ranking officials, and already wealthy families were the only ones with the capital and access to buy shares. In fact, the wealth of several well-known Nigerian families can be traced back to the preferred role they were given at the time of the indigenization decree. Incidentally, most of the wealthy Igbos missed out on the windfall. Why was this? Well, it turned out that Awolowo, as finance minister, was not as magnanimous as Gowon. Awo was responsible at the end of the war for giving back to the Igbos all monies they had left in their accounts before the war. He made the decision that all Igbos will be given £20 each, no matter what amount they had previously had. pending investigations into their actual balances. These investigations never took place, so it meant that at the end of the war, a large number of Igbos who had been wealthy had to start from scratch. So when the indigenization decree came round, none of them had the capital to participate. Despite all these negative events, and the magnitude of the mismanagement and extent of corruption that was surfacing, Gowon would probably have survived on his popularity. However, he made a crucial mistake by announcing on his Independence Day broadcast in 1974 that he did not believe the country was ready for civilian rule, and he would be postponing the planned 1976 handover. 9 months later, he was overthrown in a bloodless coup.
There was a bloodless coup today in Nigeria, which is Black Africa's biggest and richest nation and the world's 8th largest oil producer. The overthrow of strongman Major General Yakubu Gowon reportedly was engineered by the head of his personal bodyguards. Gowon received word of the coup while at a meeting of the Organization of African Unity in Uganda. He would say only, "There's nothing to worry about." Gowon, who led a 1966 military coup and put down the bloody Biafran civil war 6 years ago, had been confronted by growing student and labor unrest and charges of government corruption. Last October, he went back on a pledge to restore civilian rule in Nigeria next year.
The coup of July 1975 was very different from previous coups in two key respects. First, it was completely bloodless. Secondly, it destroyed discipline in the military by making it obvious that anyone with the guts and influence, no matter their rank, could take power for themselves. The man chosen by the coup plotters to lead Nigeria was Murtala Mohammed, the same man who had been behind the 1966 counter-coup. To ensure he did not perpetuate himself in power indefinitely, the coup plotters made him share power with two other officers, Brigadiers Obasanjo and Danjuma. In addition, he was forced to appoint specific people into key positions. A great number of the men sworn in that day have continued to rule Nigeria till today.
I, Brigadier Theophilus Yakubu Danjuma, being appointed a member of the Supreme Military Council, swear that I will not directly or indirectly reveal such matters as shall be debated in the council, in the said council, and committed to my secrecy. So help me God.
I, Captain Olufemi Olumide, being appointed a member of the Supreme Military Council, swear that I will not directly or indirectly reveal such matters as shall be debated in the said council and committed to my secrecy. So help me God.
Once his fellow conspirators had been rewarded with positions in his Supreme Military Council, Murtala proceeded to speak to the country.
Fellow Nigerians, events of the past few years have indicated that despite our great human and material resources, the government has not been able to fulfill the legitimate expectations of our people. Nigeria has been left to drift. This situation, if not arrested, would inevitably have resulted in chaos and even bloodshed. In the endeavor to build a strong, united, and virile nation, Nigerians have shed much blood. The thought of further bloodshed, for whatever reasons, must, I'm sure, be revolting to our people.
Murtala was dead serious. With amazing speed, he announced the forced retirement of all senior military officers, a mass purge of the civil service and parastatals, probes of former government officials, the movement of the state capital to a better and more central location. He changed Nigeria's foreign policy to non-alignment and made it clear he would only make decisions which benefited Africa. He also announced a return to civil rule by 1979. To ensure public perception stayed positive, he announced a low-profile policy where the military was to no more act in an ostentatious manner. He himself decided to stay in his personal residence in Ikoyi rather than move to Dodon Barracks. It was clear Murtala meant business, and the public welcomed him with open arms. Within 3 months, he became the most popular Nigerian ruler of all time.
By the timely intervention of the armed forces, the people of Nigeria have another opportunity to start again in the task of rebuilding the nation.
It was obvious to the Nigerians who watched the broadcast that day. This man was different. This man was serious. This man could make the country change. Even the US government had respect for Murtala. A classified memo from August 1975 described him as an erratic, vainglorious, impetuous, corrupt, vindictive, intelligent, articulate, and daring Hausa. The report went on to point out that the US maintained its ties with Gowon, as after another coup or two, probably bloody, he might be the only acceptable leader left. It finished with an interesting suggestion that Murtala's takeover had potentially created a precedent which could usher in more coups. The author of that report was unfortunately correct. On the 13th of February 1976, Nigeria had its fourth coup. Murtala Muhammad was assassinated on his way to work in a car without escorts. Gunmen had riddled his car with bullets while he was sitting in the famous Lagos go-slow. His bullet-riddled car can still be seen in the National Museum in Lagos today. The plotters had also planned to assassinate Obasanjo and Danjuma, but for various reasons were not successful. Hence, Danjuma was able to organize a response force led by Colonel Babangida to crush the coup plotters. With Murtala dead, a replacement was required. The North were keen that he be succeeded by a northerner, so the job was offered to Danjuma. Danjuma refused, so Obasanjo was asked to take Murtala's position. To ensure balance of power, a Northern Supreme Military Council member, Lieutenant Colonel Shehu Musa Yaradua, was promoted to take Obasanjo's place. Once the housekeeping was done, they set about bringing the coup plotters to justice.
The coup was originally conceived as a major's plot in Kaduna during a conversion exercise which brought a number of these officers together. An inner circle of 3 started the discussions. Their main grievances at the time centered around the conversion exercise itself, which they considered rather tough. This group, headed by Major Dabang, was expanded to include other similar disgruntled elements. Simultaneously, Bisalla on his own has started a similar group, also mainly composed of disgruntled elements of the ranks of colonels and lieutenant colonels. The 2 groups soon got to know of their mutual existence. It was around this time that Dimka traveled to Madrid on official duties. He was then invited to spend a few days in London on his way back from Madrid for further discussions. While there, Dimka met and held discussions with General Gawan, who told him that everything was ready and he, Dimka, would be fully briefed by Bisalla on his return to Nigeria. Based on irrefutable evidence obtained by the Board of Inquiry, Gawan has already been asked to come home and defend himself.
The nation was of course shocked that officers of the stature of Gowon and Bisalla could be involved in this coup attempt. Bisalla had been the only person from Gowon's military council who had been allowed to stay in Murtala's government. He had even sat next to Murtala during the first broadcast to the nation. Gowon, on the other hand, had walked quietly off stage after the coup against him and had been living in exile in London. It was hard to believe that he was the type of person that could support a bloody coup. Whatever the truth was, the new rulers of Nigeria were intent on making sure someone paid for Murtala's death.
The Supreme Military Council has been meeting to consider, among other things, the conclusions of the military tribunal appointed by the federal military government to try those involved in the abortive coup of 13th February. The Council has confirmed the sentences passed by the tribunal. Those condemned to death by firing squad have been executed today. These include Lieutenant Colonel B.S. Dimka and Mr. J.D. Gumwalk, 2 of the principal actors of the abortive coup.
The coup plotters were killed by firing squad in full public glare on the beach. With them dead, the nation mourned its hero. Obasanjo committed himself to fulfilling Murtala's transition program, and in 1979 handed power back to the civilians. He then retired to his farm, and the army went back to the barracks. The story of Nigeria from 1979 to 1999 is more or less the same as that from 1960 to 1979. In both cases, the civilians ruled for 5 years, and during that time, destroyed the trust put by their constituents in them through their corruption and infighting. The military then took over to, in quotes, save the country, but then found that they had to fight their fellow officers to retain power, and in the end, became just like the politicians they had kicked out. Given these similarities, there is no point analyzing in detail the events from 1979 onwards. It is interesting, however, to see some of their impacts.
Usman Aliyu Shagari, do solemnly swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the Federal Republic of Nigeria, that as President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, I will discharge my duties to the best of my ability, faithfully, and in accordance with the Constitution.
The Second Republic started just like the first had, with considerable fanfare and hopeful expectation by the masses. The man selected to lead Nigeria was Alhaji Shehu Shagari, a 54-year-old Muslim from the north who had served under both the Tafawa Balewa and Gowon governments. His running mate was Alex Ekweme, a wealthy 47-year-old Igbo man who had made his riches independently as an architect. From the outside, this northern and eastern partnership seemed to reflect the emergence of a new and progressive Nigeria. The outside perspective is rarely correct. Astute observers of the Second Republic could clearly see the dangerous parallels between it and the aborted First Republic.
You know, there are many dangerous people in Africa. The president of Nigeria is dangerous. Shagari is dangerous. As a person himself, he's weak. But his surroundings, his administration is dangerous. He is not as dynamic to be as dangerous, but his setup is dangerous. Because they all say he's great and everything, but underneath, he's spoiling the whole continent, you understand? So he's dangerous. You know, he has nothing to offer, he doesn't make big statements as such, but it's in Nigeria they come and do apartheid committee, apartheid this, you know, they're meeting about Namibia in Nigeria, everything Nigeria takes on its head. You see, but this country is a Gestapo country. How can Nigeria be talking about South Africa? You see, South Africa is better than Nigeria. I know so. But look, we are saying whites are mistreating blacks in South Africa. Okay, that is bad. That is racism. They have a reason to do it. Then blacks are mistreating blacks in Nigeria. What's the reason? That's worse. Police beat people on the streets like dogs.
From the mid-70s, a time where those who had the power to cause change had decided to adopt the if you can't beat them, join them attitude. Fela stood out as a beacon for disenfranchised Nigerians. His mixture of funky beats and strongly opinionated, politically charged lyrics filled a void for ordinary Nigerians who lacked a voice. He went further than any others dared in naming names and pointing out the injustice in Nigeria.
Elections to Ringo, Ambassador Blanham very well. Elections to Ringo, Ambassador Blanham very well. Him take all politicians, we rule Nigeria before. Disabled politicians, we spoil Nigeria before. Ambassador carry all of them they are now. The young Africans, they get 2 ears for head, them get 2 eyes too. Them they see the thing where they happen on them, they hear them too. Few people they fat with the big money and the rest they hungry. Me I challenge your boss so Jordan, while you're him there all the time. Make him carry me go when he cut tight to open book for him. Now why your government we do? Help by me oh, now Ricky my government we do. Yeah, party party government we do. Help by me oh, give money, party arranging it. Why yo, party arranging it. Give money, why yo, add them together, give me the answer.
As an average Nigerian during the Second Republic, you were like a victim of a cruel practical joke. You had just ushered out one set of corrupt leaders, only to receive a worse punch. And this time you had actually voted for them.
I'm going to sing now is one of my explanations of why Africa is low today. We all know that Europeans taught the Africans what they know today, what we use for our governmental processes. We all know about democracy. I condemn democracy now, because it's no more democracy. I write a tune about democracy, and I call the tune TDTMN. Teacher, don't teach me nonsense.
Fela was right. Democracy was not working. But in the country that Nigeria had become, you do not make these kinds of statements and remain untouched. Fela had become a real pain in the neck to the government, so they ensured life was difficult for him by continuously harassing him and his people and periodically throwing him in prison. Despite the persecution, Fela never wavered from his mission of being a thorn in the side of the government.
One thing I want to assure them, if they think I'm going to change or compromise in my attitude, in my way of life, or in my expression, or in my goal towards politics, they are making me stronger. And I'm much more stronger now. So, as a matter of fact, I'm surprised that I'm so well so quickly. I mean, the kind of beating I got, you know. Then you want to see the police beating. It's terrible. I'll show you. You must see it. Look at it. Yeah. See? Look my yash. Right out of my yash, man. See? Bad. All over my body, man. Top to bottom. They beat the shit out of me. But I say I didn't die. Because my name is Anikulakbu. I have death in my pouch. I can't die. They can't kill me. 1, 2,
Despite the
3,
continuing irritation from Fela, external events had brought more pressing issues for the government. Nigeria had entered the beginnings of a painful recession triggered by a slide in the oil price due to a worldwide glut. The slide put severe strain on the foreign exchange earnings of the Second Republic. However, for political reasons, the government did not immediately reduce spending. Instead, it borrowed, thinking things would normalize quickly. No one could have forecast that the oil price decline would last for the next 10 years. So by 1983, Nigeria was learning the hard way what it meant to be an oil state. Its foreign currency reserves had declined from $10 billion to $1 billion. Foreign debt had ballooned to $15 billion, and inflation was running at 50%. Even middle-class Nigerians began to feel the pain of recession. Despite this, the elite continued to live lives of unimaginable luxury, buying houses abroad and opening Swiss bank accounts. So to divert attention from this, the Shagari government decided to take some drastic action.
Tonight, West Africa continues to be economically and politically disrupted by the mass movement of workers expelled from Nigeria. Almost 900,000 have already returned to Ghana alone. Most of the illegal migrant workers who've been expelled from Nigeria have been making their way along what used to be known as the Slave Coast, through Benin and Togo towards Ghana. The vast number had left Ghana in search of work when Nigerian oil revenues were up and cheap labor was needed. In Benin, the emphasis is on keeping the workers moving. There is little food in Benin or Togo, and often a shortage of water. Sometimes the convoy stretches for 300 miles. Many workers had to sell all their possessions to get this far. Taxi and truck drivers are accused of charging outrageous prices, but many workers believe that staying behind in Nigeria meant prison or even worse.
And they are killing many people. If you don't go, your life is at risk. Whether you like it or not, you should leave.
The Nigerian president, Shehu Shagari, has returned in the midst of all this from an overseas visit. He's made no public comment, despite international pressure for restraint, and most Nigerians appear to support the government's decision. At this rally, for example, the illegal foreign workers were blamed for adding to tribal unrest soaring crime rates in the cities, not to mention taking jobs Nigerians want now that the bottom has fallen out of the oil-fed economy.
Unfortunately, it wasn't enough just to kick out the foreigners.
Meredith Vieira has the story tonight of about 50 students from abroad who are learning more than they bargained for. A lesson in world economics and small-town American hospitality.
They are Nigerians who came here to study and now find themselves stranded.
What do we do? There's no money. How can you live?
Tony Lott came to the University of Wisconsin-Stout 8 months ago on a Nigerian government scholarship, but his scholarship money has never shown up. Alugabi has been working on his master's degree for 2 years. With just 2 semesters left to go, his money has stopped coming. There are 50 Nigerian students here in the same boat. No funds for tuition, for housing, for food.
Before I left home, it was an understood situation that the government would take care of my stay here. Now, if they said they were not going to take care of my stay, definitely I wouldn't have even, left Nigeria in the first place.
We may be in Menominee, Wisconsin, but this is really a story about the worldwide economic crisis, a story about oil-rich countries like Nigeria and what happens when oil prices drop and the supply of dollars begins to dwindle. The Nigerian government has had to tighten up on its foreign exchange. What that means here is a group of foreign students who can't get money out of their country, so they can't pay their bills.
We're talking about $700,000 for that group of people.
And that's more money than this university can absorb. Nationwide, Nigerian students owe some $87 million in tuition and living expenses to hundreds of colleges. We've tried talking to the Nigerian embassy, Ellen Lanahan says, but every time we call,
someone will say, there isn't any money in the country right now. I don't foresee when there's going to be any money, but don't tell the students.
Still, the university says beginning next week, it will only register those students who have cash up front. That leaves people like Tony Lott and Alugabi with no money to get home, worried about deportation, and wondering about a government which stranded them when all they did was come here to study.
I would argue that Nigeria's abandonment of its brightest youth in a foreign country was directly responsible for pushing them into crime and ushered in the 419 problem we have today. Anyway, back in Nigeria, the situation had continued to deteriorate. Matters came to a head in 1983 when new elections were held. Shagari's government, despite the clear evidence of corruption, mismanagement, and oppression, was re-elected in a landslide victory. It was plainly obvious that the elections had been rigged. But who had the power to do anything about it?
We back, we back, we back. Put your hands up. We back again. Keep your hands up. We back.
And now Nigeria, which is the most heavily populated country in Africa. General Muhammad Buhari, who led the successful coup in Nigeria on Saturday, has now said that in the future, crooked civil servants would be put in jail without what he called the nonsense of legal proceedings. Other than radio broadcasts, Nigeria is still pretty cut off. The military men have cited mismanagement of the nation's economy as the reason for their move. They say that oil-rich Nigeria has become a beggar state. As Steve Shepard reports, a bad economy was where this coup began.
Nigeria today owes foreign creditors more than $14 billion. Unemployment is rampant. Civil servants have been going without pay. Last year, in an effort to deal with rising discontent, President Shagari expelled some 1.7 million Ghanaians who had been brought into Nigeria as workers, but began competing with locals for jobs as the economy started to decline. And last week, Shagari announced a new austerity budget, which would have cut food subsidies and other government programs. That apparently was too much for the military, whose leaders believed Nigerian civilian rulers were not just incompetent, but corrupt. It overthrew Shagari and promised to clean up the government. Nigeria's new leader, General Muhammad Buhari, is known to Western observers. He is considered intelligent, conservative, and free from corruption, a Western-oriented pragmatist. For that reason, U.S. officials have hope that the new Nigerian government will work to maintain good relations with the United States. Because of its influence in Africa and because of its oil, those relations are considered extremely important here. Steve Shepard, ABC News, the State Department.
Watch me! Watch
Fraud,
me!
indiscipline, corruption, squandermania, misuse and abuse of public office for self or group aggrandizement, which had assumed debilitating proportions in the last few years, will be dealt with ruthlessly, no matter whoever may be involved.
And I'm super bad. I got soul. And I'm super bad. Now I gotta move.
The private sector has also its share of crimes against the Nigerian economy, especially in the area of the distribution of basic commodities. Reports reaching us confirm large-scale hoarding of commodities. I have already warned that hoarding will not be tolerated. Gentlemen, I must point out that your assignment as military governors is a service posting. You are therefore subject to redeployment at any time as the exigencies of our calling may dictate.
When Buhari said ruthlessly, he meant it. During the 41-year-old Major General's time in power, Nigerians came to understand what it meant to live in fear. With his partner, 41-year-old Major General Tunde Ediagbon, a program to save the country was designed. They called it the War Against Indiscipline, with emphasis on war.
I want you to bear in mind the need to emphasize self-discipline and leadership by good example. Begin by drawing public attention to little but important everyday manifestations of indiscipline, such as rushing into buses, driving on the wrong side of the road, littering the streets, parks, and dwelling compounds, cheating, taking undue advantage of scarcity to inflate prices for quick monetary gains, constituting ourselves into public nuisances, working without commitment, and devoting little or no time to the upbringing of our children. Up to this moment, there has been no formal declaration of war against indiscipline. It is my pleasure, therefore, to declare today the launching day for the war against indiscipline.
The problems Ediagbon highlighted were real, and most of the solutions he suggested that day, including environmental sanitation days and queuing at bus stops, were laudable. The issue was how he and Buhari implemented their campaign. They pursued a brute force and highly physical campaign, which inevitably made them unpopular with ordinary Nigerians. People were locked up without trial, and anyone who criticized the government was ruthlessly dealt with. Politicians were arrested and detained without trial, in some cases for several years. A case in point was their bungled attempt to bring a gentleman called Umaru Dikko to justice.
The diplomatic storm that's come up suddenly between Britain and Nigeria could be the stuff of comic opera, except that no one involved is laughing. Nigeria early today ordered a British airliner carrying 244 people to return to Lagos soon after takeoff. Only tonight are passengers being allowed to depart on other flights. In London, some officials are linking this act with a bizarre kidnap attempt that backfired. The victim was an exiled Nigerian wanted back home in the worst way. The plot began to unravel when a suspicious British customs inspector ordered some airport crates to be opened. As Tom Fenton reports, his suspicions were justified.
At least 2 of the 3 men found in crates with the kidnapped Nigerian about to be loaded on board this plane for Lagos last night are believed to be Israeli mercenaries. In one crate, the drugged Nigerian Umaru Dikko was accompanied by a man carrying syringes. He is believed to be Israeli. In a second crate were 2 other men, both fully conscious. One of these is also believed to be Israeli.
They were Arab-like.
Or Jew-like.
I beg your pardon?
Or Israeli-like.
Or Israeli-like, yes.
Middle Eastern.
I think Middle Eastern would be the best general description.
A former minister and leading politician, Dikko tops the new Nigerian government's list of most wanted men. In a country where corruption had become a way of life, Dikko stood out for the scale on which he operated. The military regime, which took over 6 months ago, charges that he stole more than $1 billion before he fled the country. Diko's chief aim in exile has been to bring down the regime at any cost.
Any weapon that God gives me, I will use.
Yesterday, Diko was neatly hustled into a van by 2 men in the street near his West End London home. It was a smooth, professional operation, but it went wrong at Stansted Airport last night. The Nigerian High Commission had not properly labeled the crates as diplomatic luggage and also bungled the required paperwork. Diko is now recovering in a private ward under heavy guard. The new government so desperately wants him back, it may well have decided to go for the best and use agents from the country that kidnapped Adolf Eichmann. Nigeria's High Commissioner in London was summoned to the Foreign Office today, and there were lots of questions.
I'm not aware of that.
Tonight, there are still more questions than answers. Tom Fenton, CBS News, London.
Standing back and looking at that kidnap attempt, it was obvious that an administration that could organize and approve such an action had no respect for laws or due process. If Buhari and Idiagbo were allowed to stay in power, it was clear to their closest military colleagues that even they were not safe from brutal persecution. At the same time, the more ambitious generals who had helped to bring the regime to power had started to wonder why they were not running the country instead. Putting these two things together, it is no surprise that after 20 months in power, the Buhari-Idiagbo regime was overthrown in a coup arranged by their colleagues in the Supreme Military Council.
I know you can feel the magic, baby. Turn motherfucking lights down. Let's go. What up? What up, homie? I mean, it's what you expected, ain't it? Let's go. Turn the music up in the headphones. Yeah, that's perfect.
During the reign of 44-year-old Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, Nigeria hit new lows. Foreign debt ballooned to $33 billion. The exchange rate declined from almost 1-to-1 to 57 naira to the dollar, and corruption became a synonym for Nigeria. It's difficult to say whether Nigeria would have fared better if the Buhari-Idiagbo regime had stayed in power, as many external factors affected Nigeria's prospects during that time. However, it is clear that Babangida's ruling style, which was deft and tactical, seemed to be designed to ensure he remained in power, rather than aggressively deal with the issues the country was facing. One should be fair to him, however. His initial messages and actions were very positively received by the nation, especially when compared to what had been happening under Buhari and Idiagbo.
I'm pleased to take this opportunity to declare once again, therefore, that this administration attaches the greatest importance to constructive and helpful criticisms as well as the freedom of the press, and to declare further that the administration also attaches the greatest importance of fundamental human rights. A visible improvement in the standard of living of our people will not come overnight, of course. It is nonetheless feasible to take a meaningful action now which would alleviate the deprivation and misery of the large majority of our population within a short time. Thus, the administration will, in particular, take measures to check our galloping inflation and soaring unemployment.
An interesting feature of Babangida's takeover of government was that he facilitated the entry into power of a new crop of officers. Unfortunately for him, many of these officers would try and take power from him over the coming years. But it wasn't only within the military that discipline had started to break down. The economic and moral collapse in Nigeria had forced ordinary citizens to find new ways to support themselves.
America is such a land of opportunity, it continues to attract hard-working, honest immigrants from all over the world. But law enforcement officials say at least one country is sending not only honest immigrants, but many who seek a different kind of opportunity. Bob Fall continues our special investigative series, Cons, Scams, and Ripoffs.
No African nation has more people than Nigeria. No other has more of its people visit the United States, and according to law enforcement officials, no other turns so readily to crime. Call it the Nigerian Mafia.
The Nigerians have become what we term in law enforcement an emerging organized crime group.
Meet Akeem Salome, shown here collecting some of the $28,000 in student loans he got fraudulently, with 8 aliases. That's right, 8.
Nigerians are active in procuring student loan fraud. They seem to be more active than other nationality groups.
This Washington, D.C. mother who didn't want to be identified is part of what police say is another Nigerian fraud. She got $500 to marry, then divorce a Nigerian student so he could stay in the country. A scheme so lucrative, she went on to arrange dozens of quickie marriages for other Nigerians. Easy credit, say the experts, has made it easy for Nigerians to rip off the system. Stealing carbon receipts or social security numbers, they apply for and get numerous credit cards, which they use to the limit.
I would characterize it a major economic problem.
Millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars.
Just from Nigerians.
Just from Nigerians.
And it's not just white-collar crime. Federal prosecutors say up to 90% of all heroin sold in the nation's capital is handled by Nigerians.
There is a large criminal element in the Nigerian community, sadly, that has devoted a great deal of time to heroin and cocaine smuggling into the United States.
No, it's not true.
The Nigerian government insists that 99% of Nigerians here are law-abiding. Many are victims, it says, of bias and sloppy police work.
They assume that any black man comes from Africa is a Nigerian. The fact that somebody is carrying a Nigerian passport does not necessarily mean he's a Nigerian.
If he is Nigerian, say students of the country, what he's learned is that corruption is a way of life in Nigeria, which pays.
The most successful people in the country tend to be those who've accumulated their fortunes in corrupt means, and therefore young people, students and other immigrants take their cue from that sort of social structure.
I've had many Nigerians tell me they love it here because there's no country on earth like America. It's so easy to steal. I hear that over and over again. It's so easy.
The tough talk by Secretary of State Schultz while in Nigeria elicited a Nigerian promise to crack down on drug trafficking. But it will take more than words, say police, to stop Akeem Salome and all the others.
Despite the obvious and enormous risk, many Nigerians continue to engage in these criminal activities simply because it was a better option. At least in a Western prison, they would have 3 square meals, pipe-borne water, and uninterrupted electricity. For those not brave enough to enter this international crime scene, all they could do was stay in Nigeria and suffer.
Every day my people they inside bus. Every day my people they inside bus. 49 sitting, 99 standing. Them go pack themselves in like sanding. Them they faint, them they wake like cock. Them go reach house water no day. Them go reach bed power no day. Them go reach road go slow go come. Them go reach road police go slap. Them go reach road army go whip. Them go look pocket money no day. Them go reach work query ready. Every day na the same thing. Every day na the same thing. Every day na the same thing.
With the state Nigeria was in, it was obvious that the military had not succeeded in rescuing the country from collapse. Corruption was still rife. Life for the ordinary citizen was worse than under Shagari, and Nigeria's external reputation was at an all-time low. It was clear that the military needed to go. So pressure was put on Babangida to begin a transition program which would hand power back to the civilians and create a third republic.
We don't want Babangida again, and we want MKO.
Who's MKO?
Abiola.
Back then, I also wanted MKO to be president. After all, he was a generally accepted winner of the Babangida organized and Babangida annulled Third Republic elections. It didn't matter that I did not know much about his policies, plans, or background. All I knew was that he was rich and gave money and gifts to everyone, even little boys like me. My views were illustrative of the attitude of the ordinary Nigerian back then. Expectations for a new government were low, and the focus was on electing someone who would not do much damage. A man as rich as MKO was, in our view, less likely to steal, and given his much talked about generosity, would continue to shower the ordinary citizen with gifts and promises. So it was simple. Give us MKO. But MKO was an unlikely savior. He was part of the establishment. His wealth was a direct result of his close ties with Shagari's government and the military after that. He had even been immortalized in a song by Fela.
Start them oppression, start them confusion, start them oppression, start to steal money, start to steal money like Obasanjo and Abiola. International TT, ITT, International TT, International.
I've been reading about ITT because they are the senior exploiters of this universe, of this world. I've had ITT stories all over the world, man. I've had the stories in America, in Europe, in Chile, all over. But I didn't know what ITT was about until I met MKO Abiola himself. Then I see the evil, the kind of multinational evil they are trying to do.
Despite the questionable sources of Abiola's wealth, we still wanted him, and he knew it.
Challenge General Babangida to walk on any street of Nigeria with me without security and see how long it will take people, before people actually lynch him. That is the type of leader that Babangida is.
It is still not clear today why Babangida and his supporters did not want to give power to Abiola, despite his obvious popularity and the fact he was one of their brothers in arms. Whatever the reason, the result of their actions was a worse outcome for Nigeria than anyone could have ever imagined.
Nigga X about me, nigga X about me, nigga X about me, nigga X about me. I'm a hustler, I'm a hustler, homie. I'm a hustler, I'm a hustler, homie. Nigga X about me, nigga X about me.
The takeover of Nigeria by 50-year-old General Sani Abacha is an illustration of the quote, "From the frying pan to the fire." Babangida's continuing denial of the presidency to Abiola had put him in an untenable position. He had become deeply unpopular with the public and had lost the support of most of his military colleagues. He had to go, and he knew it. So he went, but in his own special Maradona way, by installing a Harvard-trained industrialist and loyal ally to run what he called an interim government.
I, Ernest Adegunle Oladende Shonekon, do solemnly swear that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and that I will preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So help me God.
But ordinary Nigerians were not appeased and continued to demonstrate against the interim government. Aside from the demonstrations, it was also clear to the man on the street that this interim government was completely unconstitutional.
Interim is interim. Interim, from the way I look at it, is not a democratically elected civilian government. Interim means somebody is handpicked. Come and stay here. That, in other words, means installation.
With the continuing backlash against the interim government, something had to give. And give it did. Babangida, as part of the creation of the interim state, had made an unprecedented move and appointed a soldier as Minister of Defense. That soldier was Sani Abacha. Abacha's job was purportedly to watch over the interim government. That was like asking a wolf to watch your sheep. After only 3 months, Abacha forced Shonekan to resign and finally took power for himself.
This regime will be firm, humane, and decisive. We will not condone nor tolerate any act of indiscipline. Any attempt to test our will be decisively dealt with. Long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
With those chilling words, Nigeria entered 5 years of brutal dictatorship. Abacha, unlike Babangida, did not suffer from a need to be liked, so he was particularly ruthless in removing all challenges and only surrounded himself with loyalists. His first target was Abiola, who had been going all over the country, declaring himself as president.
It will continue off and on until the military release the result of the June 12 election and put the democratically elected president, who is myself, in charge of affairs. I won't go to war. I won't encourage my supporters to go to war. I will fight for peace, and we will get peace. But you see, we do not want the peace of a graveyard, a peace whereby somebody continues to ride on the rest of us with a gun. We will get peace, but we'll get peace with decency and integrity and honesty and probity and democracy.
Abiola was eventually arrested from his home in Lagos by men from the secret police in June 1994. During his arrest, he made this call to the BBC.
What is happening at your house? Are you being arrested?
I'm being arrested. I'm just going out now with the police.
Hello?
There's a large crowd here, and I was being escorted out to detention by singing the national anthem.
Why are they arresting you?
They are arresting me on an allegation of felony, nameless treason or something like that. They're not doing anything, they're just taking me away. Please let me go. I'm delaying them.
And so where are you now? Are you in your car?
I'm in my car now.
Is it police who are with you in your car, or are they escorted? Yes,
the commissioner of police is in the car with me, and my senior wife is in the car with me.
Why are they letting you talk on the phone to the BBC while they're in the middle of arresting you?
They have come to arrest me, not to arrest my mouth.
You sound very cheerful about it, Chief Abiola.
Of course. It is all part of democracy here.
And you're happy to go to the police and await whatever charges they're going to file against you?
I'm not in any way disturbed by it. Any sacrifice is in order. If it will bring democracy, peace and prosperity to Nigeria.
Is it possible to talk to the Commissioner of Police who's with you in the car?
I don't know if the Commissioner of Police is authorized to talk. He cannot talk to the press.
What is your advice now to your supporters, many of whom we heard a moment ago?
Well, I told them before I left home to just stay calm. It is very, very important that they stay calm.
So you're appealing for calm. You don't want them to take any direct action in your support?
No.
You still say you're the president of Nigeria, but it's not much good if you're going to be in jail.
Well, Mandela was in jail for 27 years. Kenyatta was in jail. I suppose that is one of the qualifications you need in this part of the world. Don't worry yourself, my friend.
That turned out to be his last interview. Abiola would die 4 years later, still in detention. With the Abiola problem resolved, Abacha then turned his attention to his military colleagues. Having participated in several coups, he was acutely aware of the need to consolidate his power. So he was quick to arrest and detain senior officers, whether active or retired, including Generals Obasanjo and Yar'Adua. His final focus was on critics of his government. Anyone who made a negative comment, be they journalists or ordinary citizens, were detained by his secret police and tortured. A particular example was his execution of Ken Saro-Wiwa and 8 other Ogoni leaders, a story of injustice which has been well covered, so I will not replay it here. So Abacha's time in power can be characterized thus: I came, I saw, I destroyed. If Buhari had taught Nigerians the meaning of fear, Abacha completely redefined it for them.
My people say they fear too much. We fear for the thing we no see. We fear for the air around us. We fear to fight for freedom. We fear to fight for liberty. We fear to fight for justice. We fear to fight for happiness. We always get reason to fear. We no one die. We no one wound. We no one quench. We no one go. I get one child. My mama different house. My pa different house. I want build a house. I don't build a house. I no one quench. I want enjoy. I no one go. So policeman go slap your face. You know go talk. Army man go whip your yash. You go they look like donkey. Rhodesia, they do them own, all leaders they have for nothing. South Africa, they do them home. Them live sorrow, tears and blood.
Given the terrible state of the country under Abacha, it is not surprising that during that time, Nigerians found God in a major way. But some had better reasons than others for finding God.
People in Nigeria, Christians, believers, I will give 80% the fact that they are running into Christ because that is the essence of living. Without Christ, there is no life.
How can you begin to say everybody all of a sudden is having vision? And in that vision is still one thing, that they should be pastors, they should be evangelists, and it stands to reason it can't be true. Most of these are fake, false, product of the society. It's more of a problem of hunger and famine in the land. Everybody wants to make ends meet.
They are self-type pastors, they are self-type evangelists, and whatever name they want to call themselves. Even you've been hearing some of them calling themselves bishops, archbishops, but I'm yet to hear one of them calling himself pope. Thank God. They draw people to themselves by claiming to work miracles. I think a lot of these miracles they claim, miracles in inverted commas, a lot of them are stage managed.
The Bible is about miracles. The whole of the book of Acts is the foundation of the church. And the Bible says that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. If he worked miracles in those days, then he should still be working miracles today, and he'll work miracles tomorrow.
Well, in the end, God did work a miracle in Nigeria by carrying out his own coup.
The key oil-producing country of Nigeria is in a state of flux. Its military leader, General Sani Abacha, has died of a heart attack. Abacha was 54. Top officials of the West African country convened an emergency meeting to sort out the question of succession. Who will run this country, long kept under Abacha's thumb?
The passing away of General Sani Abacha was almost as momentous an event for Nigeria as gaining independence. It meant that, once again, Nigerians could resume their struggle for democracy.
The struggle of the Democratic Front against Abacha has not been against him personally, but against military dictatorship. And there is only one cause for the military to follow, and that's to understand that they now have a very graceful, very fortunate way of retreating to the barracks and allowing the will of the Nigerian people to go forward.
The military decided to heed Soyinka's advice. They appointed 55-year-old Abdul Salami Abubakar, one of the few generals who had risen to the top without holding political office, to lead the country back to civilian rule. Abubakar immediately released some of the individuals who had been under detention by Abacha, one of whom was Obasanjo. Obasanjo had these comments to make after his release.
The moral standard in this country has come down. That's one thing that shocked me when I was in prison. Even the people that you think will stand for principle, they just fall like a pack of cards.
Have you found in the short time that you've been out of prison that this is reflected in society at large,
Yes,
that Nigeria is crumbling somehow?
Yes. The very few Nigerians now stand on principle. They will go for whatever they can get, materialism, and they will try to rationalize what is not even rationalizable. Oh yes, we join Abacha because we think we could influence Abacha. And who can tell you that he can reform devil? If it was possible for God to reform, he would have reformed Satan. And if God could not reform Satan, then anybody who thinks that he can reform an evil man is deceiving himself. He himself will become evil. And that's what has happened. Either voluntarily, or by association, or by compromising.
These are strong words you're using.
Yes, they are. But these are things that I believe.
Given the kind of comments Obasanjo was making, it was no surprise that he decided to run for president soon after, on a promise to clean up corruption and restore the moral standards of the nation.
We created an agency that will have nothing, the job will be to seek, to search, and to recover, both from within and from without. And it will have a tribunal to back it up.
But the other candidate was also making the same promises.
So the first thing to do about dealing with corruption is to have a president and a government that is transparent and straight.
Nigerians have heard all of this before.
Since 1966, every successive government that comes in, the first coup was to deal with corruption in Nigeria. And every other coup, they've said the same thing, that the previous regime was corrupt and we're coming to clean up.
It was true that we had heard it all before. It was also true that the presidential candidates were all part of the regimes that had created the problems that now needed to be solved. It would be more a selection than an election, but it would still be better than military rule. So Nigeria went to the polls and ushered in the Fourth Republic.
Ow! Oh! Woo! Smash that! Yeah. I'm back! I'm back! I'm back! I'm back! I'm back! Get up!
In Nigeria, Africa's most populous nation, Saturday marked a significant government transition. CNN's Catherine Bond reports on the country's first civilian president in 15 years.
God as President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria,
A historic moment for Nigeria as Olusegun Obasanjo, retired general and chicken farmer, was sworn in to head only the third civilian government Nigeria has had in almost 40 years. In his inaugural speech, he promised concrete measures to tackle corruption, which he said had brought Nigeria to its knees.
The beneficiaries of corruption in all forms will fight back with all the foul means at their disposal. We shall be firm with them. There will be no sacred cows.
Seated behind bulletproof glass at the ceremony, South Africa's President Nelson Mandela. He was among guests who also included Prince Charles, This transfer of power is seen by many as the most positive development on the continent since the end of apartheid.
The order transfer of power from Abubakar the general to Obasanjo, the elected president, is as powerful as a shift from de Klerk to Mandela. And matter of fact, it's even bigger because in South Africa, 29 million people, here, 130 million people.
It's no exaggeration to say this is a make or break opportunity for Nigeria. The start of a new civilian government, which, if it works, could create stability and recovery. But if it fails, will leave not just Nigerians, but many West Africans with little hope for the future. Catherine Bond, CNN, Abuja.
It is very pleasing to say that 8 years after that historic day, Nigeria is in a significantly stronger position. It was make or break, and we made it. Whether or not one gives the credit for that success to Obasanjo and his team, the facts are clear. External debt is now 4 billion from 35 billion. The Nigerian state now has a credit rating, facilitating access to international capital for Nigerian companies. Our foreign exchange reserves have risen to 40 billion from almost nil. The Nigerian stock market is up 900%, with significant investment inflows from both Nigerians and foreigners. GDP growth has been an average of 7% per annum, with a significant portion of that coming from non-oil sectors. New industries like mobile telecoms have been established with significant associated job creation. Foreign countries are even returning to Nigeria. There is an energy and vigor in the people, as well as return of confident expectation for the future. Probably most tellingly, Nigerians who left during the dark days have started to return home, as they see better opportunities at home than abroad. In simple terms, Nigeria is back. It is tempting to end our journey on that high note and celebrate the full circle we have traveled, but we can't and we shouldn't. This film is about truth and balance, and if there is something Nigeria lacks today, it is balance. Nigeria's rich have never been richer, yet its poor have never been poorer. 55% of the population is below the poverty line. Sometimes those abstract statistics are difficult to grasp, so see for yourself.
And how much do they normally pay you for that work? For today, I'm getting 1,800. Just for the day. Is that your normal or is it better? No, it's a special duty, so okay, so it's better than normal. Yes. But normally, I think it's about 1,000.
1,400 naira is the equivalent of £7.20 per day, or £144 a month. Henry ate, traveled to work, and generally survived on that wage. But Henry was one of the better off people.
For a month, if you sell how much? For 1 month? If you really know for that, I think it's 10,000. If you sell 9,000 for the whole month? Yeah. Now enough money? Safe, Nigeria, I understand Nigeria is too hard. Nigeria too difficult, it's too hard. Thank you.
Uche made the equivalent of £40 a month, or £2 a day. It's amazing he could laugh at his situation. I couldn't. One can always argue that the cost of living in Nigeria is cheaper, so you shouldn't compare it to the UK. But the reality was, earlier that day I had visited a fast food place on Victoria Island, an equivalent of McDonald's, to grab a snack. That snack cost me 3 times Uche's daily earnings. 55% of the population are like Henry and Uche. That is not abstract or difficult to grasp.
It's just that the situation in the country now is very critical. You have to really go down, swallow your pride and do whatever comes your way. Yes. You just have to put your qualification inside the cupboard, lock it up, and pick whatever job available to survive. That is just it.
Do what they can to survive, but their lives are still bleak. If things are bad for them, how do you think they are for their children? The reality is I don't see those children breaking out of that 55% poverty bracket, unless they do it by force. And maybe they will one day, like in the Niger Delta. The Niger Delta situation is just the beginning. If inequality persists in Nigeria, we can only expect more. So I close this film with a challenge to all those who care about Nigeria and its future. We have a duty to leave a better legacy for our successors. We have a responsibility to create a nation we can be proud of. We need to return to a place where to be Nigerian is to be great, where everyone enjoys a minimum standard of life, where the accident of birth is not the sole determinant of your prospects. We need to take our rightful place as the greatest black nation in the world. I have no magic solution for how we do this, but I know two things. 1, revolution starts with the individual. 2, right now, the wind is behind us. Thank you for your attention.
Now, my people, the time has come to rise and take our destiny into our hands. Look all over the world and you will find and a nation great was built by its people, love and sacrifice. You will find, and all they do, they place their country first and above all things. If we all do the same, I know and I believe we can make Nigeria great again. I believe we can do it. I believe we can make it. I believe we can do it. The time is now. We set our hearts to it. Oh, our generation and those unborn, this clarion call we must heed to love our country above all things, to have a sense of history and build our fatherland. A strong desire in our hearts, then we found it. That is all that is required. Nothing is beyond us now. Make Nigeria great again. I believe we can do it. I believe we can make it. I believe we can do it.
once there's a good government in one African country, the whole of Africa will be liberated. See, we need one good government, a straight and progressive, clean government that knows what it's doing. No diplomacy, no compromises, no agreement, no Marxism, Leninism, no capitalism, Africanism.